there. Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for coming back. So the last time we talked about parenting practices, we talked about starting from a place of knowing what sort of human being you want to raise, you want to grow. And so we talked about those priorities maybe revolving around kindness towards self and others, knowing oneself well, someone being hardworking, organized, the skills you want your child to ultimately have. So once you have that in mind, you can purposefully and intentionally build those and create an environment where your child can co-create those skills with you for him or her. And so today that's what I'm going to talk about, is how I do that in the classroom setting. So with my purpose kind of as a part of me, like always cognizant that that's the ultimate goal, I enter a school year with, I would say, like 4 primary goals, four tasks that I need to accomplish in order to kind of build those skills. One is to establish my authority. I need the little people in my life that I am trying to guide and help and raise and grow understand that I am that guide, and that I am that protector, and that I am that teacher, and in your case, parents, that you are the parent, and that for the well-being of everyone involved, we have the ultimate say. And we are benevolent dictators, but we are dictators nonetheless. And I will, for everybody that's going, oh, right now, if you can turn this off. If it doesn't resonate, it doesn't resonate, and I completely understand that. Or you can hear me out and see if once I fully describe that, if it resonates. If it still doesn't, then forget it. So I find that it is extremely beneficial for my students to understand that I'm the boss. It teaches them things that they can't really be successful in those goals that I have for them if they don't understand that there is a hierarchy, that's a natural hierarchy that benefits everyone involved. And it's not that I'm not open to other systems, but I entered education believing the opposite, that it was this environment where students were just as in charge as I was. And, if they didn't want to do something, they probably just, needed to, then maybe they didn't need to because there's a good reason. And, well, if you want to do that, I don't really see anything wrong, small problems. And at the end of my year, it's not that I did all sorts of harmful things for students. I did a lot of things that helped them, but almost every student, when I asked for feedback at the end of the year, because that was part of it, we were always, what do you want? What do you, all let me know, our classroom was pretty out of control and it would be good for you to work on classroom management, was the feedback I got from my 5th graders, my first year of teaching. That sense of that felt safety could not be realized in an environment where there was no alpha. And I'm not talking about the kind of alpha, but just the alpha that stands up and recognizes that I'm the boss. And I will smile at you while I tell you what to do, unless you need me to show a different face, right? Because sometimes a smile is not in the best interest of the person you're giving it to. But ultimately, it is best for everyone when you establish authority. And this can be really hard for parents, especially in a world of mixed messages. But from what I have observed time and time again, children thrive in environments where there is a loving alpha, and research demonstrates that as well. So research has affirmed, decades and decades of research on parenting has shown that children who have the best outcomes, whatever that means, different things depending on the research being done, generally come from homes where the parents are both nurturing and have firm, strict boundaries and a pretty strong sense of, so I'm the authority in this situation. Versus parents who have only the authority without the warmth, or only the warmth without the authority. But I have to say, and this is where I mean, and maybe my opinion will change, but from everything I've observed and read and seen and experienced, if you're going to pick one in terms of positive outcomes for humans, if you're going to choose one extreme, it's better to be in the extreme of cold and firm boundaries. And I understand in terms of, so what the outcome generally is then is you have somebody who can manage themselves, do life, have structure, and then needs to go to counseling and learn how to be kind to themselves and etc. Versus in the other type of situation where maybe you have very warm, loving parents, but it's very confusing because there aren't really any rules, or there are mixed messages, and you have this chaotic home where the parents and the child are arguing and the parent isn't happy and doesn't really like the relationship with the child because they're just, their behavior is negative, and that creates negative and negative. You end up having a child who, despite being raised in a warm and loving environment, isn't especially warm and loving. They're rather self-absorbed in a negative way. They don't really have a sense of their feelings because they often weren't allowed to have any negative feelings. They were just appeased. They have very little tolerance for any discomfort whatsoever. So they're generally very unhappy. They make others unhappy, and they don't have a lot of life skills because they've never been pushed. And so it's heartbreaking to see students or children going down that path. And so I know I'm not advocating for not having warmth for your children. What I am trying to do is emphasize for those who, like me, felt guilty kind of coming into that place of, no, I'm the alpha. That is one of the biggest gifts we can give to our children. And as part of your village, I encourage you to stand up and take on that role that needs to be yours as a parent. And exactly what that looks like, of course, will vary depending on who you are and who your family is and what you want that to look like. But in my classroom, it looks like, if I say it, you do it. You don't do it after you've thought about it. You do it immediately. And if you don't, then we have a conversation about that. And if there isn't, if we agree, like, oh, you made a choice to ignore me, and that's not okay. So there's a consequence for that. And that is the tone in which it's administered. So we create an environment where I have high and consistent expectations, and part of that is, if I ask it, you do it. Every time. And one of the ways that I support this is by, obviously, I have the expectation that when I ask, it will be done, to the point where if I have a student, say, walk into the classroom in the morning and my expectation is that they're silent, and I see them go to a friend, one of the things I might say is, I'm really confused because my expectation is a level 0 voice in the morning. Thank you so much for remembering that and doing your job. And so it's that. It's not, oh my gosh, that's 5 points from Gryffindor. It's not that type of authority, because that's not super effective. Perhaps it is for some. I haven't found it to be effective in my own experience, but to each his own. But it's that sense of, I've seen parents make a request of their child as if they know their child won't do it, and there's really no point, right? So or they would you please do this? You don't need to. You just do this, please. It's not a choice. It's something that is within their best interest, and it's your responsibility, right? It's our responsibility as the adults in the relationship to be a part of them working toward their best interest. So we say it, they do it, done. And I talk about how this is especially important in emergency situations when we practice drills, because if I give a command, it needs to be followed. It's not a discussion. It's you act right now. There's a level of trust, right? I'm the adult in this situation, and you trust me. So that sense of authority is the first thing that I teach my students. The second thing is so closely related, but some will kind of see it as an opposite, is independence, hey Piggy, self-regulation, and just like self-empowerment. So let me talk about how I built that in. So this once again is related to expectations. And just like I expect that my rules will be followed, my directions will be carried out immediately, and I'm demonstrate confusion when it's not, and like, of course you're doing this, of course you're wonderful when it is being done. In addition to that, there's also the expectation that as a 6 and 7-year-old, you are fully capable of doing these things for yourself. You are fully capable, with teaching and support, which I provide, obviously, of analyzing what you need, where you need to grow. So learning how to reflect, learning how to set individual goals and move themselves forward. Things like pushing in their chairs, zipping up their backpack, throwing away their trash, keeping their desk organized. So then I teach and remind, teach and remind and expect. And then whenever I see it, it's, yep, I love the way so-and-so is doing this. Of course they're doing this. That's who they are. Or I'm really confused because we've talked about how to organize the desk and this doesn't look like this. Thank you for fixing it. And then it's fixed and then it's affirmed. And just consistently reinforcing those standards. In addition to taking on personal responsibility like that for their own learning, their own space, etc., another way that I build and foster independence is by taking every opportunity to build in leadership for my students. And so you can do this at home with siblings and with things around the house. And so giving them jobs that are expected to be done and to be done well are ways to empower children in household chores. And again, unfortunately, there is often this pushback of, oh, they're too young, they shouldn't be responsible for someone else, or they shouldn't have to do that because they're just kids. My argument would be, while I respect, if that's how you feel really strongly about that, then more power to you. Where I am coming from is having observed the results of that versus other as a teacher and as a friend and looking out at these children, it sometimes has an unfortunate consequence. And so when children don't have that responsibility. So I've seen households in which children have a great deal of responsibility for their siblings. So I'm thinking of one child in particular. She's a couple years older than her brother. And growing up, she would help him with his homework, mom watching close by. But mom very intentionally gave her those tasks to empower her. It wasn't that, it helped mom too. It was very wise. Mom had extra time to do things. And meanwhile, she's cultivating this beautiful relationship. They are now teenagers and have an amazing relationship because they were really depending on one another and supporting one another growing up. But we're not talking about a latchkey situation where parents are, all the responsibilities on the child. No, it's very appropriate level of responsibility where they're supporting each other, helping one another. And then with household chores, this is your job. This is needs to be done. And you need to do this before you can do other things. And it wasn't a battle or a fight. It was just an expectation. And so another piece of parenting, or another it really is like my next bit of parenting advice is what I'm trying not to say is, number one, remember you're the alpha. Number two, make your child responsible, encourage independence and reliance on self. I have a dear friend of mine that I really admire because she does such a beautiful job of this with her children. Linz, if you're hearing this is a little shout out to you. She, since her son was just a babe, she has made sure that he is buckling himself in, that he is pulling himself up, that he is throwing away his stuff, carrying his own stuff. And he's just this little stud muffin of a human who is super responsible. He's in kindergarten now, and it's a lot easier for him, the transition, than it would be for other kids, because he walks in and he's used to being more self-reliant. And the gift that they, amazing parents, are giving him is really inspiring to me. So, one, you are the alpha. Two, let your child be independent. Encourage that, nurture that, give them more tasks. When you think, well, they can't do that, challenge yourself. Really? Can they? Maybe do we just need more time because it takes them more time? Do we need to get up earlier so they have time to make their own breakfast? And then you figure that out. So since I've resorted to steps and what I was trying not to say, parenting advice, because it's not really what I want this to be, but it's just a different perspective. This is my lens, my value system, which I employ in the classroom, and based on what I've seen other parents do well and has resulted in positive things for their kids, both young and older. So the third thing is working to see the child for who they are. So as an adult, whether in relationship with anyone, whether it's our spouse or our friend or our child, we have our own lens. And oftentimes we forget that we are seeing the world in a very specific way. And when we are being a part of a child's development, I find that it's especially important. I mean, it's always beneficial to try and see something from someone else's perspective. But when you're dealing with someone that's just developing, it's really important to kind of step back and kind of suspend your judgment and your opinion and kind of watch and observe what you notice. So I actually spend a lot of time, I'm doing multiple things in the classroom, but I spend a lot of time observing my students. And part of my job is analyzing them as readers, writers, mathematicians, scientists, social, emotional learners, etc. So I can be very purposeful in that less authentic environment, but even at home, especially, notice, what is your child like? Are they introverted or more extroverted? What does that mean for them? What sort of friends do they choose? What are the qualities they look for in friends? What are they drawn to? Not just what they like, but why do they like those things? How does their body seem when they see something like they're afraid of or they're excited about? Those nuances. In our modern world, we have so many things going on, and there's a lot on we're on our devices getting things done, and none of that's bad. But there is something to be said for creating space to be and observe and in the moment and be mindful. And often mindful parenting is about, am I being mindful of my own actions? But what I'm talking about is being mindful of who our children are, their inner worlds from the young age. And some of that's just observing and noticing and responding. And sometimes it's having conversations, especially as children, become more verbal. And then, of course, through their teen years. And really asking them those sorts of questions, which is going to develop. So if we're talking about those goals I talked about earlier about kindness and empathy and knowing themselves and having a high self-concept or strong self-concept and being able to talk about why they feel the way they do, why they like what they do. I mean, you're increasing critical thinking skills, you're increasing metacognition, you're increasing so many strong thinking and feeling skills by having those conversations with your children. So one, being the alpha, two, fostering independence, and three, really seeing your child for who they are and trying to get to know them, being curious, just like you do hopefully with your spouse as well. One of my favorite marriage gurus are the Gottman team, and I love and Esther Perel is another one, but they both talk about this curiosity around being the spark of your relationship and in your romantic relationships, in your partnerships, and it's the same thing with any relationship, coming from a place of curiosity rather than, okay, well, I'm going to tell you how you need to do life and this is what it looks like. And for some people, they might say, well, how does that fit with the authority? Like number one, you're the alpha, but then you're letting them dictate. No. Let me see if I can give you an example. Okay, so I have a student who I've known for a couple months now, and what I've learned about him, one of the things I've learned about him, of course, so protecting his anonymity, is that he is really passionate about becoming an adult. Like, he's a student. It kind of reminds me when I was young, like I knew I wanted to be a teacher. He knows what he wants to do. He's really excited about this field. His brother is kind of in that field and he just worships the ground his older brother walks on, and he's super passionate. He's very his whole personality is very joyful and enthusiastic. He has a ton of energy. As you can imagine, he's, based on what I'm saying, he's quite social, and he loves having fun and being silly. He's going to be a blast as an adult. He's a blast as a kid. But of course, as a first grader, he's still learning how to regulate, appropriate moments to bring out the blast. Now, so I have worked to see him. And to try to understand, because that's all it is. It's not a perfect process. It's just a work. I've worked to understand as best as I can who he is as a human being and what's important to him. And as it's developing, he's a developing human. And at the same time, I have expectations, high expectations that I expect him to meet. And he knows that I understand that you are excited and that you want to talk to friends and that you're social, and that's a beautiful thing about you. But you are not going to speak right now because you have another job to do. So you're going to do that job. And so that being said, I can pull him aside and have a conversation. So I know how much you love to have these conversations. I know that you want to talk to this friend about this. So I validate. I see you. I get it. I connect, man. I see you at a deep level. I also know that you want to be successful and do your best, and that my expectation is that you're working on this right now, not talking to him. So how are we going to solve this problem? What's your plan? And so together, we came up, he made a plan. He moved spaces, which was a fabulous way for him to solve that problem. And he did, and it was fine. So it's just things like that. You're not compromising that alpha, that authority, because that doesn't, it's not like, oh, he likes to talk, so I'm going to let him. That's not good for him. When you set that boundary, so if I would have just said, oh, he likes to chat, so I'm going to let him, I'm fostering his personality. No. That's from my perspective and what I've seen, again, just one lens, my perspective, that is very damaging to him. That's dramatic. But I have seen children suffer as a result of that, where instead of setting a boundary, which they can learn from, practice self-regulatory skills from, refocus on something else that's important to them, and be affirmed in what they love while they channel their efforts elsewhere for a moment. That has a lot of profound benefits versus just, oh, he likes to do that, so I'm just gonna let him. That's not only distracting for everybody else in the class, because at home you're not worried about everybody else. It's just that child. But it is beneficial to offer boundaries and limits. And you just have to decide what's important to you and to know why. Have a reason. Okay, so 1, be the alpha. 2, foster independence. And 3, see your child. Work to see who they are. This has been a rather long video, but I really hope that it was helpful as you think about general practices that will support you in your goals for your child. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below or reach out to me at Playground. The link is on the channel page, so you can find that. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.